Live from Mount Zion, Utah, it's the Zach Ballinger Show, where we help you find your direction through passion and purpose. My name is Zach Ballinger. I am your host. Thank you guys so much for joining us out there today. We've got a great guest coming up. Couple of house cleaning items. We are streaming via YouTube, so if you're watching us live, feel free to enter those comments, questions into the box. We'll make sure to answer them as we go, as well as you guys can always email me, zach@zachballinger.com before any show, and we'll make sure to ask our guests those questions. So without further ado, Tuck, thank you so much for joining the show today.
Absolutely, Zach. Thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
So we're going to jump right in. So what is your exact title? What do you do career-wise?
Yeah, I always introduce myself. Hey, I'm Tuck Ross. I'm in marketing, and I know it's a broad term, something you and I chatted about. But right now, I'm a senior vice president of marketing at Synchrony, which is the largest private label issuer in the U.S. of credit cards, and so focused primarily on the consumer engagement with adoption of credit cards and our other financial products.
And so, you talk about marketing, and you're, I guess, a VP now, right? Or
senior vice president. So executive level, and gunning for that CMO role next.
So walk me through your journey. Where did that begin? Give me your education background, and then how did you get into marketing, and how did you get your career today?
Yeah, it's a good story, and a little unconventional, as it were. If we go way back to things that aren't even on my LinkedIn, right? I was a janitor. That was my first official role. And I think, when you think about the things that all of us look at in our lives and what impact us, in some ways, the humility of what is in some ways a very basic role, everything from mopping floors to cleaning toilets, you learn respect for work. And that's something that's been built in for me from the beginning. I think it guides my work ethic. Never too proud to get my hands dirty, literally and figuratively, and understand exactly how things work and what needs to happen to make it work, even at the lowest level. And that served me well, I think, through my path. Everything from retail experience and that. But coming out of high school, I was actually a physics major, and I had a full ride to USC on physics scholarship, another university as well. And, I just didn't quite feel it in my heart that that's where I really wanted to go next. It was a little bit of, I think all of us get this, right? A little bit from the parents saying, hey, this is, you should be in science. Your dad's an engineer and all that. And I enjoyed it. I just didn't feel like that was my path. And so I bounced around 5 majors first year in college, and ended up being undeclared for a while. Was an art major for a bit. I'd always wanted to be an animator. And then coming out, I just sort of went with generic business. It seemed like something that was applicable across the board, and candidly finished out at community college and finished up that path and jumped into working. My first role was at Target, and then I landed a spot at Countrywide, which is now Bank of America, in home loans. And it was an interesting spot because it was one of these roles that you had the opportunity to, very exclusive type of position. There was only 12 spots in the organization. It was a team that was brought in almost like an intern type of group, but had exclusive access to rotate around the company in these different areas, learning the business. And then depending on the business unit that liked you, you got to be placed into that business unit, and then essentially guaranteed a role after that 12 months. And so went down that path. The role that I ended up with, the group that selected me, was in the internet customer service group. Now, this was a time when, if you're familiar with the digital product world or digital marketing, there wasn't really a product role in that organization. It was IT and then everyone else. And what was really fun was I was answering phone calls from people that were having trouble servicing their loans online. They were having trouble doing something on the website. And we were actually taking live calls to help those customers walk through that, almost in, hey, log in, check this, reset your password, that. But then also taking any of the customer experience issues that we could identify and saying, is there a way that we could solve for this, writing product requirements and then passing over those to the IT team and working with them on that development path. So it was very frontline customer service, but also very connected to developing actual digital product, which excited me. And I think that's really what changed my direction and why I ended up focusing on digital the most, because I could see the real-time engagement with the consumer, how they were working through that environment, and honestly giving them the ability to solve problems, right? Hearing something that was a problem, working towards a solution and making it better, easier, faster, more convenient, and so forth. So that was what turned my direction. But I took a break. I was accepted to grad school, got an MBA out of Pepperdine here in California, and master's in business strategy and marketing specifically. And then didn't have a job coming out of school. And I think a lot of people deal with that sometimes when they're coming out, especially in the current environment where things are a little bit different, right? We're not maybe in the same type of environment where there's just a lot of things to pick from, or there's a lot of competition. And so I actually turned down 3 roles while I was interviewing for Disney. And it was something that I had my heart set on. I was hoping for it. And it was a 3.5-month interview process. But I eventually landed that spot into a team called Corporate Alliances, which was a team that had not had a new hire in 4 years. And the average tenure in the group was about 15 to 20 years. And so difficult to get into. They sat right underneath Bob Iger, who is still the CEO, acting. Obviously, Disney's going through a lot of change with the launch of Disney Plus. But that group specifically was in charge of the corporate alliances for Disney, HP, Hasbro, IBM, all these major corporate relationships, Coca-Cola, Kellogg, a lot of them sourcing-based relationships, right? Food and drinks for the parks, IT software, Chase for financial services and the credit card that they had, but also then marketing relationships. And so we were trying to figure out, how do you build up the sourcing side and then be able to market them into the parks to provide a marketing value back to those businesses. So I was pretty basic marketing analyst at the time, but taking a lot of the learnings that I had taken from the internet space and what was happening there and applying them, almost an impressions-based model to the alliance relationships so we could start to value them. And that was something that hadn't been done before. That was actually my special project while I was there, and it was pretty fun. They're still using that model today in order to value those relationships and make sure that they can communicate what they're giving back to the partner, and also to make sure that they're justifying the high prices, because those are multi-million-dollar relationships that those partners have, and they're global. So they do need to make sure that they're working for them as well. I know I'm going fast. Feel free to jump in.
No, you're doing great. This is fascinating.
Right. Okay.
There's a lot to unpack there, because I love your story. First of all, you mentioned the janitor role. One of the best businessmen I've ever met was my father. He's been in the Chinese restaurant for 43 years, and he's not afraid to still wash dishes or get his hands dirty, cook. Talk to me about never giving up. Talk about some adversity that you've had in your career. I think we see you're a senior vice president now of marketing, and a lot of people are going to look at this interview and say, hey, Tuck's really successful. I'm sure nothing bad has happened in his life. Everything's been a straight shot to success. Talk me, what's the one setback that you had to overcome?
I think there's a few, right? I think when I was growing up, my mom had cancer when I was 13. She had it again when I was 30, and she didn't make it the second time around. That first time around, anyone who's gone through cancer or had that in the family, it's a significant financial burden. And so, there's some assumptions that, people that end up in a good place have a lot to start with. And no, I think a lot of us who have gone through that and understand that, I think it makes you work harder, but you earn it, right? And there's not necessarily a position of privilege that you start from. And then separately, my dad had a business, and it sounds like, your dad's hustling as well. And the business that my dad had actually folded and went and they declared bankruptcy, right? And went through that piece of it as well. So those two things impacting me in my teen years, put me to the point where I paid for all my college. I actually just paid off my student loans last year for grad school as well. So, I think it's everyone pulling them, by their bootstraps and saying, how do we do this? And go through the different types of situations that you deal with as you come, right? And I think the key to that is not being afraid, not getting overwhelmed, and saying, how do we take this one step at a time? Huge props to my dad for pulling the family through those types of situations with single income, right? 3 kids and all that. And then, all of us coming out on the other side and saying, how do we individually solve for our futures, right? And taking it from there.
Wow. Amazing. Just amazing. So in your current role now, things change every day.
Yeah.
Right? Everybody's going to say that. But, if you had to walk us through a typical day in a role of your role, when you get out of bed in the morning to when you go to bed at night, what do you do in your job functions?
Yeah, it's funny. I added one of those widgets on my iPhone in the new software where you have the ability to, put the dynamic smart widget on, and it gives you suggestions based on location, time of day, the rest of that. And it always pops up email frequently opened when you wake up, right? And so I think, there's probably rules against some of that, but it is something that I do check first off, just to make sure there's no fire drills. We work in a national organization. East Coast does get up earlier, and always making sure that the business is attended to, especially since a lot of what I do is specifically in digital, has a 24/7 accessibility, right? We're driving digital media. There's social media as a part of that. And so making sure that the business is clear and attended to before you jump in your day. I think, there's a quiet period in the morning for me, getting ready, getting coffee, some of the basic things like that. And then I have 4 kids. So it's getting them all ready. And in the pandemic, it's been a little bit different because not all of them are going to school all the time, or there's different days, or they're at home, right? Half the time. And so it's a little bit of that juggling of, okay, how are we set up? What's the setup for today? And then how am I jumping into my schedule in the home office, right? Which is right here, since we're all remote now. And so that's a little bit of that schedule, from a personal side. I think from a practical side, every week, Thursday, Friday, I'm prepping my meetings for the week and the week after that. So about 2 weeks ahead, making sure that we're set up on cadence. I have a team of about 15 that report into me, including some extended team on top of that, and making sure that team is allocated properly, but also, with the dynamic environment that we're in, heading into 2021, it's making sure that everyone's clear on what is our strategy and our approach for next year. What does the business want to do? How are we meeting the demand for the business growth? How are we dealing with some of the changes, whether it's reductions in budget or shifts in resources? How are we addressing, especially in some businesses where there's matrix organizations like the one I'm in, how are we addressing are the relationships we have with other teams and working in a more collaborative way to make sure that everyone knows how we're doing that together. And so for me, it's a lot of that pre-check, a lot of that scheduling. I'm a big planner. I'm a big to-do list builder. And it's nothing fancy, right? I use reminders in Apple, in iOS, right? And the rest of that. But I think I make sure that I'm constantly combing it, setting agenda for each day, each week prior, and then rolling through, and making sure that there's, I'm very high touch. I'm laid back from the sort of oversight perspective, but I'm high touch in terms of engagement to, one in a diverse and remote environment, making sure that people know that I'm here, I'm available, and I can help respond to things, enable people, and also tear down walls. I mean, I think a big part of a manager's role is to enable their team to be able to perform well, and assume that they're going to be able to do that, and then break down barriers, right? And it sounds negative, but a lot of times it's equipping, enabling, and giving them resources to be able to do the job that they need to do every day, and to make them feel confident that they can do that with their skills and capabilities that they've brought to the business themselves.
Awesome. And what are you passionate about in your career? I always talk about passion, find your direction through purpose, and passion is kind of my motto. And, life's so short. I just believe that we were all meant for so much more. You look at statistics, 70% of Americans actually hate their jobs. And for me, my whole vision around this is to change that paradigm. Talk to me about what you're excited about in your job. What are you passionate about?
Yeah, no, I love that. I think the first one is, and I say this in business talk, it's follow the consumer, see what they're interested in, use them as your guide for your business, your product, your service. Worry less about the financials, and it's hard to say that sometimes, but if you focus on them, the financials work out, right? Because they're the ones who are engaged with you. From a kind of personal perspective, that's a relationship. For me, it's about people, it's about relationships, it's about the connection that we have, and the shifting way that is moving in the business space is interesting to me. I think solving for how do you build relationships in 100% digital environments, the ways that we used to do interpersonal, whether it's events, right, or connection points that we would sit together. You and I could be sitting in an office together. Now we're doing this via, a virtual roundtable, as it were. And I think thinking about how do you maintain, develop relationships, build loyalty, and encourage even advocacy for a brand or a product or service is something that's interesting to me. And I find the ways that, especially, as I've grown up through my career, being able to do things like, try these different ways that digital connects people using Facebook ads when they first came out, because I believed in social every minute of the way as each of those platforms adopted and grew, and looking at, where things take off, like TikTok and the entertainment value of that space, and Zoom, most downloaded iOS app of the year, as all of us are seeking, additional points to stay connected and find ways to do it in a visual way, because phone calls are important, yes, but being able to do this face to face, to see each other, you and I chatting here is really the way that we're intending to move forward. So I think my passion personally is around people, around the relationships, and building that for businesses. It's not B2B, it's not B2C, it's B to human, and it's founded in a very basic principle, which is as old as time, which is the interpersonal relationship.
Wow, awesome. And I'm going to put you in a time machine and we're going to travel back to your past.
Sure.
We're riding along in the space shuttle right now. We're taking you to the second, third, fourth, fifth grade. What did Tuck want to be when he grew up? What was your dream career?
Oh, it's so funny. When I think back that far, I was a massive nerd growing up. I had huge puffy hair and I wore these giant sweaters. I wore pony sneakers. I don't know if everybody remembers those, LA gear and the rest of that. But I think, growing up, I was really into, as I said, drawing. But I think the piece of that was interesting to me was creative. I loved any kind of art. I still have a massive appreciation for all things art and the creativity that comes from people and just the self-expression that comes through that. And so I think for me, marketing is the manifestation of sort of the art and the science put together, which is where I reconcile my physics background with my creative background and putting those things together and saying, how do we sort of solve the two halves of who I am with that passion for creative and also the relationship piece in there, but also doing it with data and understanding how people actually are in the numbers as much as they are in the qualitative as well. And so I think if you go way back, I was drawing comic books when I was in third grade. I was writing stories. I would hang out with people and we just sit down and draw stuff, right? And so doing all that was fun, and that's how I spent a lot of time engaging, reading comic books, spending time at the comic shop, all the rest of that.
I love how you touched on that because I devote a chapter in my new book, Don't Be a Zombie, How to Find a Career You Love, to we're going to take you back to your past. And then I take people back to their past, and there's a reason why I do that. So a lot of times we have dreams and aspirations that, I talked to somebody the other day. He said, I've always wanted to be Batman because I wanted to help people.
That's cool.
And what I found in that, maybe you're not going to be Batman when you're 30 years old, but you can help people. And that was the whole value and the vision of this dream. And so if we can take these dreams and take some skills and sets from that, funnel that down, we can change our direction sometimes by looking back in our past. And so you had this dream of being an artist, and although you don't paint or draw for a living, you're using your creative ability in the job you have now, which is fascinating to me. So I love that story. Now, on the flip side, sometimes this is a little bit challenging for people to answer. Other people can name it right off the bat, but what's something that you don't like about your job or something people should know that's some really difficult behind the scenes?
I think I don't know if I don't like it, but I think the thing that I work to solving for every day, there's probably two things I think about often. One is the health of the team. And I think it's solving for, like I mentioned, the fact that we're all remote now. How do you understand the health of your team, continue to engage them, keep them supported and motivated, especially in the environment where there's a lot going on. And a lot of people have different dynamics, whether it's at home that are impacting their life more because they're at home more often, right? Or there's just a different set, right? They need to be closer to their family, or they have to do this or whatnot. So I think that's the first thing. And it's not necessarily something I don't like about the role. I love it. I love trying to solve for that, but it's a challenge to try and figure out how to do that piece of it. And I think the second one is, thinking about how do you solve for the interpersonal relationships at work. And some of that is because it's impacted by what's happening back here, but then on the individual basis, but then thinking about how do you move an organization together in the same direction, again, against common goals, but also everybody has a different motivation for doing what they're doing, and solving for each of those individually while we're moving together is a big piece of what honestly keeps me up at night. It's less about the financial results, because what I've seen, especially in organizations, even the one I'm in now, is that when people pull together, the results come together against a clear strategy. It's more about, the team starts to falter when individuals start to falter. And so solving for that, that approach, that communion of individuals together and coming together in a way that moves like a single organism, I think is the way that I love to solve for on a daily basis.
Awesome. So we did have several questions that come in, so I want to
Yeah,
jump right over to those. So the first question comes from a senior in marketing. It looks like they're going to finish their degree next semester in business.
great.
And they want to know, they said their professors are encouraging them to get a work experience before they get their MBA, but they want to go ahead and get their MBA. What advice would you give to this student?
Yeah, I think we always want to say, hey, let's hustle up, right, and just kind of finish out the school thing and move on to the next. I would encourage some type of work experience, and here's why. It may create a little bit of a gap. You feel like you're starting a little bit later. There's you've got some increased impatience there, waiting for that next step. But I think the one advantage that workspace gives to you is context for what you're going to do next. A lot of what is in the MBA programs, for the ones I looked at, for the one I was in, is that they're looking for relevant real world experience to be able to apply to the best practices, the principles, the training that you're going to get in those rooms, and say, hey, this is what we're trying to do now. Solve for that based on some of the things you've worked with, or here's a situation you may have seen something similar. If you don't have some of that context, it is more difficult to think about how do you practically solve that. And I think the reason why that's better going into it is that after the fact, if you're just using theoreticals heading into the workplace, it is more difficult to think about how do you actually solve for that in a real world situation without knowing the different variables that may come at you during the situations. And so I do see, the advantage of some experience, maybe it's a year, right? Or even just 2 years of having a little bit more in this space to understand, again, how that interpersonal relationship works, how the business moves, how goals work versus what people are trying to achieve, especially in these types of environments. What do you do with thinner resources, and how do you solve for, challenges that the business is facing? It gives you a different context, and looking at that gives you that environmental experience to mesh with, again, the principles of what you're going to be learning in the program.
Thank you so much. Next question comes in. I'm a senior from high school. I'm thinking about majoring in business, but I really don't understand what marketing means. What is marketing
Yeah.
101?
Yeah, I think at the basic, the most common definition that I like to use is that marketing is communication of the value exchange between a business and an individual, you. And I think it's thinking about, and a good example is Apple. It's an easy one, right? We can assign a brand value to Apple because it's not just a laptop, it's an Apple laptop, which elevates it. That brand has been built over time from things like quality, right? Price is a piece of that, but also the way that the hardware and the software work together and the exclusiveness of the two of those things, which is why iPhones are so valued over, say, Android devices and the rest of that. Take that and then say, okay, the marketing piece of that is then how do you communicate that value out there? How do you use that? Now, Apple does a couple different things, right? But you think about Nike, they're very provocative in that space with how they market. They're worked with Colin Kaepernick, right? And he's a very controversial character in the space. It's hard for him to get a job in the NFL because of what went down. But from a very specific base, he is a high motivational character in especially the sports world. And if you're 20 to 30, especially in a certain demographic, you value his relationship with Nike, and Nike sales go through the roof when he's working with them. That was a smart play for Nike to associate his narrative with their narrative and then say, how do we bring that to market to sell shoes, essentially, right? So as much as it feels like advocacy, their whole point there was to sell shoes, and it worked. And so I think when you go back to those examples and say, what is a brand? It's the communication of that extra value that relationship or that product or service has than something else. And then how do you take that to market to communicate that value to be able to enable that next step, which is that transaction, and then the loyalty over time to continue along that path. So I think it's a little bit different than business, because business overall is sort of that communication or that formation of, hey, we've got the finance piece of it, we've got to figure out the numbers, there's the legal, all the pieces that go into it. I think marketing is the more specific factor of how do you create a relationship with a consumer and help them understand what you have of value, understand what that exchange is, because they're going to inform what you should be developing next. And then how do you continue that path to keep them engaged with you?
Great answer. Thanks for the help. Next question comes from a high school student. They say, should I go to college and major in business? I want to open my own business, but my parents want me to go to college, but I want to go ahead and open it right now. What would your advice be?
I think it depends on what business it is. And in some of these cases, you can sort of do both at once. And you see a lot of these, I think the beauty of what's happening online right now is that maybe it's not that specific business, but maybe there's a way to get closer to that step while you can still go to school and to take the next step in the business space. Now, a lot of people don't do that and they do phenomenally well with their business. But again, there's more people that do go to college and then go to that next step. And by the way, if your business doesn't work out or you change gears, you always have that degree there that you don't have to go back and try and get later. So it's a good advice to sort of go that path. But if you want to start your business now, or even start what I consider maybe the beta round of that, which is try something online. Maybe it's a t-shirt shop. Maybe it's, you being an affiliate and promoting via videos on TikTok or whatnot. There's ways to get into a business, maybe not the specific one, to try it out, to get your feet wet and learn some things while you're going through that mode, almost like in a part-time model, to get you to that next stage, as it were, and learn along the way.
Yeah, I love that advice because, like you, I've seen a lot of people not go to college and open a business and be very successful. But at the same time, I know if you do the research, a lot of businesses that are successful have started out 5,000 and under. And that means that people are doing a side hustle. They're working on the side. So why not go ahead and get your degree in business? You can learn about different functions of it and then operate your business as that. And then guess what? If it starts to accelerate, you know exactly what you want to do. Like you said, if it doesn't pick off the ground, you've got your 4-year degree to kind of go back on it, as well as all the fundamentals you learn around the business function. So completely agree with you.
Yeah. And I think one more thing on that too, right? Like, I think we all just have way more free time than we expect. You go into your screen time on your phone, you realize how much time you waste in apps. You're watching Netflix, you're playing video games. Like, cut some of that stuff out. You probably find 2 hours minimum a day that you could be devoting to your point, a side hustle or even your business, even while you're going to school and doing the rest of that stuff, because there is all these pockets of time that you can find. So I would encourage to kind of look at both, because it gives you that perspective, but also you'll understand the level of running a business, because you have to have that level of hustle. You're going to be working beyond that sort of 8 hours a day window to make it something that takes off.
Absolutely. And then we'll ask you this last question here, and it's pretty basic, but it just says, what does digital marketing mean?
It's
it's a basic question, but not a basic answer.
this is I love this question. And I almost don't even use the term digital marketing anymore, because it's becoming passe, but I think it does describe obviously what's happening online. When I started in the space, there was very traditional marketing. When I was at Hasbro, I had to go in and make very strong financial cases of why we should spend money in social media versus TV, because 100% of the budget was spent in advertising on TV. Very different world than now. But I think before, there was traditional marketing, which meant things like outdoor, print, like magazine marketing, radio, some of the more basic channels that were available at the time. And sort of like from the 50s to the 90s and heading into even 2000, a lot of these other channels weren't available. When that started to change, digital marketing popped up, and now it's display ads, and then it was search media on places like Google, and then it became social, and so on and so forth, right? Now you can advertise on Spotify and podcasts and all the rest of this. That's digital marketing is, in my opinion, the most basic definition is anything that's in online, in any one of the digital channels that's trying to reach a consumer with an advertisement, or a product placement, influencer, sponsorship, or something that's a little more integrated as well. So anything that's traversing, whether it's on your phone or desktop, is really what would be defined as digital marketing. Again, a lot of businesses are almost 100% in that space, especially D2C businesses, because they find it so efficient. So for them, it's just marketing. And I think that's what's interesting about our world, especially as 2020 comes to an end here, is that a lot of businesses have made that full shift over, and there's almost no more of that, what we'd say traditional marketing left. And a lot of it's just digital and forward.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time today. This has been so motivational, even for me, and I've learned a lot just myself. I can tell by the questions that people are asking that they're very much interested in your interview and your time you shared. We know you're super busy with everything going on. So just thank you for giving back, and thank you for coming on the show, especially before all the holidays.
No, absolutely. Thank you so much, Zach, for having me. If anyone wants to say hi, my website, tuckross.com. My email's on there, my social's on there. You can find me at Tuck Ross on Twitter and LinkedIn. Happy to chat about marketing or anything else you guys have questions about.
And guys, you know, I'll end on that. That's so nice of him because, you know, a lot of you out there always ask me, you know, I'm shy on LinkedIn. I don't know who to contact.
Yeah.
Guess what? He just gave you the first connection that you can have. And so why not go ahead and take advantage of that?
That's right.
So we're going to link to your links at the bottom of the page for people to connect with you. So I want you to have a great day and have a great holiday.
You too, Zach. Thanks so much again.